Slateboards to notebooks, from rote to note, implications on literacy and education. The invention of various types of technology depends on the needs of the culture, and the evolution of technologies into new types depends on the successes and the shortfallings of previous transition technologies. These new technologies have the potential to supplement the technology or completely replace an established technology. The dominant technologies of the literate era includes the papyrus roll, the codex, and the printed book. Technologies such as the slate tablets and chalkboards are considered secondary technologies because they fulfilled a need that couldn't be met by any of the dominant technologies. Although writing itself has been around for millennia, the use of slateboards and paper to record writing has evolved both gradually and simultaneously. Paper was first invented in China in 105 AD and was made using small bits of tree bark and cotton rags. This ancient paper was originally called tapa. It wasn't known as paper until tapa made it to Europe, where the Europeans mistook its origin and thought it came from the Egyptian papyrus, i.e. paper. It took several hundred years for the paper-making materials to become what is known as present-day plant-based fibers. At the same time that paper making was becoming industrialized, students in classrooms were relying on small pieces of slate reinforced with wood for strength and stability to complete daily lessons. Paper and pen were available for use at this point in history, but they were expensive and hard to come by, whereas slate was the more economical option. Slate is a metamorphic rock formed from the continuous exposure to heat and pressure over time on clay minerals. It is widely known for its use as flooring and roofing and has historical uses such as billiard tables, cemetery markers, and chalkboards, for its durability, resistance to moisture, and ability to be broken into thin sections. Students would write on the slate boards using small pieces of slate, which could be easily wiped clean using a rag. The slate writing utensil was eventually replaced with the soft limestone chalk, which was easier to use and clean, and the rag eventually replaced with the felt eraser, which could absorb more chalk dust to keep it out of the air. It was the year 1800 when a Scottish headmaster thought to connect students' slate boards on the wall in front of the classroom in order to illustrate large geographical maps. A year later, an American math teacher used the same idea to present large mathematical formulae to large audiences. A short 8 years later, every public school in Philadelphia was using the strung-together slates as a large field display in classrooms, which served as a flexible and versatile visual aid, a device that was both textbook and blank page, as well as laboratory, and most importantly, a point of focus. Students no longer had to listen to the teacher and work independently at their desk. They had a reason to look in a common direction to learn together. As the slateboard evolved into the blackboard, which evolved into the chalkboard, papermaking continued to become more prevalent and economical, soon being cut into small, manageable sections, and eventually being bound by a helical piece of metal into a coil notebook common to today's students. The organization of classrooms and availability of teaching and writing technologies stipulated the use of rote memorization as a learning strategy. The student seats were arranged facing the front so that the teacher could address the class, a design that part contributes to a teacher-student command-obey relationship. This is not an environment that encourages understanding, but rather an atmosphere of tension and discipline. Students were expected to repeatedly practice the concepts at hand, which required a medium in which to practice skills such as penmanship and math skills, but also relied heavily on auditory practice to increase recall. The use of paper notebooks in the classroom didn't necessarily eliminate the need for rote memorization, but it did provide an alternate path in which to place more focus on other teaching and learning techniques. Note-taking has shown to increase the ability to recall information, especially information that is auditory, as well as improve learners' attention while listening to an auditory lesson. The act of writing down information can be considered the learning tool since it contributes to construct more significant and deeper levels of knowledge. The cognitive requirement of physically writing down information that is being heard activates cognitive processing of the information. As well, note-taking skills such as paraphrasing and elaboration can help students to better understand a topic. Writing can be defined not only in the physical acts of describing words on a medium, but also by the technical and cultural dimensions. Together, writing becomes a technology that influences culture in a myriad of ways, including socially, economically, spiritually, academically, and educationally. As a technology, writing calls for the use of particular tools including a writing surface and a hand tool on which to inscribe words or symbols. Instead of the smooth-surfaced, machine-made paper and the ballpoint pens we use today, early writers had to be inventive. At the time of their use, slateboards were the economical and convenient choice of educational writing implements, considering that paper was expensive and hard to come by. The educational community required a writing space that teachers could display passages of text, students could practice their handwriting, and demonstrate competencies such as mathematics. The only downside to the small pieces of slate was their limited capacity for writing and their impermanence. Being able to write thoughts and practice writing skills allowed students to externalize their thoughts and increase their awareness and perception of the world itself. Ong argues that the act of writing, utilizing any technique, allows the writer to regard the mind itself as a writing space. When the writer formulates his or her thoughts in their mind, the physical act of writing merely embodies the writer's consciousness onto a medium that can be perceived by others. It's essentially making our thoughts visible and allowing for a mode in which to communicate with our society. As paper manufacturing became more economical and increased the availability worldwide, students were able to instead use personal notebooks to practice handwriting and demonstrate educational competencies. The impermanence of slateboards required students to internalize most of their teachings and utilize the learning tool just as a practice board. With the prevalence of paper notebooks, students were able to write information and build a repository of information that could be saved for later reading. The remediation or evolution of one technology into the next is dependent on the successful features of the older medium informing the characteristics of the newer medium. Bolter states that the remediation is a process of cultural competition that requires both homage and rivalry among technologies in order to improve the old and create the new. In terms of the technologies of discussion, the blackboard remediates the personal slate for its size and ability to address entire groups. The chalkboard remediates the blackboard for its one-piece composition, and the paper notebook remediates the personal slate for its reusability and retention of information. Each takes the best features of the technology before it and creates a new mode which functions to enhance the culture of its time. According to Mayer, there are two important epistemological goals: retention, or the ability to remember information, and transfer, the ability to use knowledge to solve problems. These coincide with the 6 cognitive process categories of Bloom's taxonomy: remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. The first category, remember, is the simplest of the 6, yet is also essential for the remaining 5 categories. Remembering fits into the first educational goal, retention, in that it relies on knowledge acquisition. The remaining 5 categories fit into the second educational goal, transfer. Rote learning is learning by acquiring knowledge and seems to be without insight. Bettino describes rote learning as acquiring knowledge by verbatim memorization and arbitrarily incorporating it into a person's knowledge structure without interacting with what is already there. Even though rote learning has been, and still is, made fun of for being inadequate for meaningful learning, the reality is that humans learn by listening, by repeating what they hear. Acquiring knowledge involves the ability to remember information, storing it in long-term memory in order to recall it at a later time. As an example, rote learning would involve a student reading the content of a text carefully, going over the material, and memorizing the key facts. This student, who has relied on rote memorization, would be able to successfully complete a retention test, but would be unable to transfer the information to solve a problem. Rote learning has proven to be very useful in learning concepts such as the rules of grammar, historical facts, the names of presidents or Roman emperors, and verses from the Bible or the Quran, but the concern with rote memorization is its limitations to the timely context of the information, as well as the importance of critically analyzing the information. Mayer says it well when he says, when teachers concentrate solely on rote learning, teaching and assessing focus solely on remembering elements or fragments of knowledge, often in isolation from any context. In contrast, meaningful learning is learning as a knowledge construction where students engage in learning, mental organization, and integration. With the advent of paper notebooks, students were able to offset some of the cognitive functions previously preoccupied by rote memorization in favor of devoting more time to constructing meaning and understanding concepts instead of simply recall, which will lead to cognitive change. With the critical information recorded in a notebook, students are able to place their focus on problem solving and applying the information, which enables students to reach a higher taxonomic category of understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. The ability to record notes in a personal notebook for later recall allows students the ability to analyze and store information as well as improve recall and retention.